ensuring that every drop of water contributes to Kenya's food security. Also joining us on this panel is Mr. Eric Ogalo, representing the Royal Danish Embassy, which is a strategic partner in investing heavily in sustainable water and climate resilience solutions in Kenya. And last but not least, Mr. Dominic Deval, representing the World Bank, a global voice on water financing and long-term infrastructure solutions. Thank you for joining us on stage this morning. Now, this conversation is about money. How much money do we need? Where will it come from? And how should we allocate it? So let's begin the conversation with you, Mr. Korir, and Sustainable Development Goal number 6, which ensures universal access to water and sanitation by 2030. As we speak, Kenya requires approximately 1.76 trillion shillings to achieve universal access to water and sanitation by 2030. Where does the country currently stand in terms of progress towards this goal?
Thank you so much, Michelle. I think if you recall the keynote address by the minister, he gave the scope for the water. In terms of water coverage, as a country, we are at 73%.
I'm being told your mic isn't on. If you can have someone assist.
Well, I think it's on.
Yeah, the mic is on. All right. Carry on, Mr. Korir.
Now, what I'm saying is that in the earlier presentation of the keynote address by the minister, he gave the scorecard for the sector, especially the water sanitation, where in terms of water coverage, we are at 73%. Sanitation, we are at around 69% in terms of improved sanitation. Now, earlier on, about 3 years back, the ministry, in trying to achieve the universal coverage of water and sanitation, did an investment plan, costing all the projects that are required to have us achieve 100% both water sanitation, water coverage, and also sanitation coverage. And this came to about 905 billion shillings. That's about $1 trillion. And this has been costed with project by project. Now, the sources of this funding, one had been identified as the GOK revenue allocation, that is the revenue raised by through taxes and others. Then the donors were also to chip in about 12%. Then commercial financing, and I think that's why the PPP people are here, the bank was here. They are also been earmarked to contribute to about 8% of the financing. And then there is also the PPP, the commercial banking and the PPP, and then concessional financing through development partners. So all that has been earmarked. But the gap between what is available and what can be achieved is where we have a challenge. I think through the national government at the moment, we are less by around 50%. And then the development partners are supporting, but not to the extent that we expected. So we have a challenge of water financing, but we are working very hard to see that we diversify the sources of financing.
Right. And when we talk about financing, it's good that we have a representative from the World Bank on the panel. But also just to remind our panelists that this is more of a conversation and not a monologue. So do feel free to chime in on your fellow panelists' point if it does add value. Now, Mr. Korir, you've mentioned ambitious projects and a shortfall in funding. With limited resources and competing needs, what areas has the ministry identified as most critical for investment? Say top 3 key areas.
Because of that challenge, at the moment now, we are looking at the underserved communities and then the emerging urban areas. These are the places where people are aggregating, and the servicing of such areas is a challenge. So the main focus is water and sanitation for those emerging towns, and then also the underserved, mainly in the dry areas, the rural areas. Those are the areas that we are targeting, and we are putting up projects that are not big in nature, but just small enough that have a lifespan of about 10, 15 years as we alleviate the suffering now. We are also putting a lot of our efforts on water harvesting. This is building water storage structures so that we are able to conserve the runoffs and prevent the flooding that happen. And in the process, once we've stored that water, we are able now to treat it and give it to the citizens. The third one is on the last mile distribution. This is where initially, I think as the minister said in the morning, the last mile connectivity is normally a preserve of the county governments, but the capacity is lacking. Now you'll find we will have invested in water systems that are big, availed water to the nearest point. But now to connect that water to the last consumer has been a challenge. So in the last 2 years, we've been forced now to look for resources to extend the water from the storage tanks that we've constructed and now take to the last mile, that is to the support of the community. So those are the areas that we're looking at. Water storage, serving the underserved in the rural places, emerging towns, and in the slums, as well as now the last mile distribution to alleviate the suffering of the people. Thank you.
And those three key areas will definitely need a lot of conversations around funding, which we will come back to. But P.S. Kimotho, when it comes to irrigation, which is a huge game changer in terms of food security in Kenya, only 30% of Kenya's irrigable land is in use currently. What is the challenge, and how does the State Department plan to increase this uptake amid conversations on improving water access? Sorry for that.
Thank you. Thank you for that very, very good question. Actually, we are not even at 30%. We are actually at 22% of our irrigation potential. And it's true, we are only at 22%, yet we have a whole 78%, and we are still importing food. Like at the moment, as a country, we are importing over $4 billion USD, things that we can actually produce here. But the biggest challenge has been the issue of water. But in Kenya, we actually don't have a physical shortage of water. We have plenty of water. What we have is an economic shortage. And economic shortage points to water harvesting, and that talks to investment finance. That has been the biggest challenge. But recently, we launched a plan, which we call the National Irrigation Sector Investment Plan, which envisages to put an additional 1 million acres, so that at least we can get to 50%. But in that plan, because of just what I've shared, the issue of shortage of water, we are looking at working together with the development partners, the government, and the private sector. And as you know, private sector will always come where there's money. So profit is key to the private sector. So the plan envisages a situation whereby the government and the development partner come in to de-risk so that they can catalyze the private sector investment. So in that plan, we envisage to an investment of 600 billion, and of that, 39% will be done by the development partner and the government, where not them doing independent project, but them doing the heavy lifting. Then the last mile connectivity, we leave it to the private sector. And that way, we are going to achieve our objective, which will help us towards also addressing the issue of food security. In the likes of countries like Pakistan, where we import, the irrigation is around 50%. So we believe by such a plan, we'll be able to do that. But the key thing is water storage. Because currently, even the area under irrigation, is 747,000 acres, which in the last 2 years, we've been able to move that from 664 to 83,000, which also has helped a lot in production. Because as a result of that, a key example, one of the value chain like rice, we've been able to increase from 192,000 metric tons to 293,000 metric tons. Very good progress, which has also helped us reduce the rice importation. So with more interventions, of water security and water storage, we should be able to address that gap and be able to ensure we have a food secure country. Thank you.
Now, water and agriculture are devolved functions, essentially being undertaken by county governments. How would you describe the state of coordination in terms of ensuring these projects take off? Many of them have many times been white elephant projects or projects that have stalled midway because of lack of coordination between the two levels of government. How would you describe the state of that relationship?
Yeah, so it's true. Agriculture is a devolved function. But you see, what we are doing, we are actually an enabler. We are doing the infrastructure. As a State Department, we facilitate the development of the infrastructure. The county government now come and do the service. You see, after we put the irrigation infrastructure, what the county government now comes to do is to bring extension officers who will actually help the farmer to actually do the actual production. So there's a very clear coordination on that. But to help in that, we have formed what we call county irrigation development units. Every year we have done an irrigation project. After completion of an irrigation project, we hand it over to county irrigation development unit. These are units which have a water resource person and an agriculture person. And we do capacity build them before we hand over the infrastructure to them. Then from there, they take over the element of production. So there's no conflict as such. Actually, the issue, as I said, it still comes into the funding gap, which again, we are working with our development partners to also help the counties have funding enough to also help the farmer with the agriculture input, and also help the farmer to be able to capacity build the extension officers. Yeah, thank you.
All right. So let's hear from one of Kenya's development partners, Mr. Eric Ogallo, representing the Royal Danish Embassy. Denmark has been a consistent supporter of Kenya's water journey. What would you highlight as one of the key success stories in your partnership with Kenya?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think when we sit at Denmark, what we see is a very strong governance structure that the Kenyan government has put in place. And that is one of the things that draws Denmark into this partnership. The other bit is that we have very well-performing utility. If you look at the WASREB impact reports, it tells you how the utilities are doing. And this gives you where can you actually invest to take water from the so-called the source to the people. The other bit is because there are also institutions that are well embedded and they also know their functions well. And also this comes with very clear developed investment plans that we can plug into. But the other interesting bit for us is we need to look for water beyond the tap, yeah? Because behind the dripping tap, there's the ecosystem, there are people, there are institutions, and there are policies. And that what makes us also very interested to engage and say, look, even as you want to lay the pipe from one point to the other, let's look back a bit and look at these other components. And I think there's more discussion about climate financing, investment proofing, and considering climate change in the picture. And when we talk with the government, they think in this kind of space, and that gives us more power to engage because we are also looking at a way we can look at the people, how do we empower them and give them capacity? Look at the natural resource, how do we put money to empower and improve the natural ecosystem? And lastly, we also come with the financing so that we can do some form of investments. Thank you.
Right. And so looking across the sector, what areas in Kenya's water investment sector, or the landscape rather, do you feel are still untapped and could use more funding?
I think for now, we are coming in with a discussion around groundwater, yeah? Because we know that every Kenyan is looking at the water in the dam, in the river. And Kenya is getting to a place where we need also to look at the underground water. And I take an analogy of drinking water, or if you drink a soda in a straw, you're actually able to know what you are drinking. But imagine if you go to a shop today and you find the soda in hole covered, then it means that you can't know when am I going to finish the drink, where am I, how does the drink color look like. So we are taking the discussion down, can we understand our groundwater? Does it have the potential to also mitigate and also come into the gap between some of the water shortages we are experiencing? So we also see that's a very key area. We are also coming in with an idea of peer-to-peer partnership, because remember now, we have an African development strategy where we say that we see Kenya as equal partner in water management. So we also want to sit at the table and share experiences, because there's a concept of leapfrogging. We don't need to drag in a stage, yet there are some countries or some initiatives that have been done So we could follow these steps so that we can move from one point to another. But this can only happen when we have countries like Denmark that can also share how do they use their groundwater. Because if you go to Denmark, 100% water comes from groundwater, and you don't need to treat it. You go into a hotel, you open the tap, and you drink it from the tap. So the question is, how do they do it? So those are some of the experiences we can sit down with the ministry and start discussing, and that comes with a project that we're now implementing on groundwater management and mapping.
All right. So let's now bring in the global financing perspective. Mr. Dominic Deval is a World Bank representative. And you know, Mr. Deval, they say no one wants to keep pouring water into a leaking bucket, right? What, in your view, are some of the governance and even economic factors that influence donor funding and donor funding decisions altogether?
Thank you, Michelle, and thanks very much for inviting us along to this event, which I think is a great idea to really spread these messages. Now, your question is very pertinent, and I think that the nub of it is that we really have to look at different types of funding in the sector. The most valuable funding, if you like, is the government of Kenya's own financing, because there's a lot of flexibility on how that can be allocated. Then you move on to development partner grant funding, and there's often some forms of strings attached to those. So then you move on to concessional lending and then commercial lending. The challenge to sort out this not pouring water into this bucket the whole time is to really make sure that you match the existing sources of funding with the types of investments that are needed, the types of returns that there are to different types of funding. So just to give you two examples, if you have government of Kenya funding and you have to build a large water harvesting structure, that's probably the main and best way to spend that money. But if you have grant money, which is specifically meant to be targeted at the poorest of the poor, then that is well allocated towards somewhere in Samburu or in a low-income area, as P.S. Korir was saying. But if you have then commercial financing, you need to make sure that there is a revenue flow that can be paid back in future. And if you have, and you need to identify those very, very carefully. So it's matching those different sources of finance with the types of project is key. And for that, we really need a water sector financing strategy.
What role would you say the World Bank plays in de-risking investment opportunities in the sector? And specifically, how do you make risky projects attractive to donors and the private sector?
So this is exactly following on this matching issue. Where you have limited risk, so there's no need to use that de-risking money. Where you have, for example, taking now the irrigation sector, where you have many farmers who'd like to invest in irrigation but don't have the cash flow to do it, an institution like the World Bank, working with commercial banks here and with suppliers of irrigation equipment, can de-risk that chain so that the farmer can go to a supplier of irrigation equipment, and that supplier will have a credit line from a commercial bank, and the commercial bank can have a partial risk guarantee from either the World Bank itself, or now all of that is actually pooled in something called the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency.
P.S. Korir, we hear Mr. Deval talking, de-risking investments, donor funding, but when we come back home, water is a basic human right. How does the State Department then balance water as a human right and the financial sustainability of the sector itself?
Thank you so much. I think just starting from where my colleague from the World Bank has said, as part of the de-risking, it starts from policy. In the Water Amendment Act of last year, 2024, we first of all gave a conducive environment for the private sector to come in. And that's why the Act enabled PPP to happen within the sector. Then with that, we have an agency of government that is called Water Services Regulatory Board. This is the agency that sets standards of service provision and also sets up governance of the water service provision, because for water to be accessible at reasonable cost, we have to reduce costs or losses, and that is where non-revenue comes in. So as part of the licensing regime, we set performance standards for the water service providers, set the level of allowable non-revenue. We also set standards on issues of pricing, because we cannot treat rural people like the way we treat the urban areas. So when setting the prices, which is a participatory process, we make sure that water service providers are not loading unnecessary costs into the water service provision. So that way we are able to ensure that water becomes both a social product, which is affordable to even the poorest of all, and also a commercial product where a private sector can come and invest in. And we have several projects that now we are looking at how do we make it attractive to the private sector. So an area that we've identified, which is a quick win for us, is the non-revenue reduction area, where a private sector can be given an area to make sure that the water distribution system is efficient, no leaks, all people are metered, and the metering is efficient so that there is no loss. Then we also, through WASREP and WSP and the banks, we are also now looking at how can water service providers have a healthy cash flow, where now they can approach a bank for financing so that they can do the distribution. So those are the things that we're doing. But at the back of our mind, we are not losing the sight that water is both a social product which has to be accessible at low cost. Even now, the communication that we're telling people is that we are not selling the water. We are selling you the services that brings it to you. The storage, the treatment and the chemicals that goes into it, the distribution or the transportation from the point of source to your home. So it is not that we are selling water, it's just the convenience of having potable water at your doorstep. Thank you.
All right, and rightfully so, as a human right, water should be accessible and affordable. P.S. Kimotho, you deal with irrigation and food security. Food itself is a basic right as well. When we talk about donor funding and priority areas of investment, technology is a key area of investment when it comes to irrigation, to ensure that even farmers can make the best of every single drop of water they do get. We've seen huge leaps in things like precision irrigation, even among smallholder farmers. What are the current steps the State Department of Irrigation is taking to ensure that these technological advances are affordable to the common farmer?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. So first, it's true, technology is the way to go when it comes to water efficiency and ensuring that also we maximize on our yield. One of the first steps that you're doing, first of all, is to ensure standardization, because standardization is key when it comes to this technology, so that we make sure our farmers are able to get the maximum benefit from the same. So secondly, as you've rightfully put it, technology is good, but it's also expensive. So we have come with innovative ways of how farmers can be able to access this technology, this irrigation equipment. So one key thing is what you're calling result-based finance. And result-based finance, for it to work, we again need to work in partnership. The farmer, the government, development partner, and the private sector. A good example is a situation whereby you have a farmer who is looking for an irrigation equipment. And the irrigation-based and the result-based finance, what would a farmer would do ordinarily? Probably a farmer would pay 10% to the irrigation equipment supplier, and he'll be given the equipment. After he has used the equipment, and it has been proven it's actually performing. That's the issue we are saying the result-based, is when the farmer is expected to pay. And when it comes to payment, the farmer will actually pay after he has already used and he has done the production. And when it comes to payment, again, the farmer is linked to a bank which will give a credit finance on the same. And for example, if an equipment is going for 100,000, a farmer will place a 10% deposit, which is 10,000. Then the development partner, together with the bank, will also give a partial grant, maybe of 50%. So in that case, maybe 50,000. So what the farmer now will have to pay or will get in form of a loan end up being 40%, which is like 40,000, which actually will also be paid way after. So that way, what you've done, you've made it affordable, because that means the only farmer is only supposed to pay 10%. So when you make it affordable and you create awareness and you uniform it, that means also you've created a big opportunity for even irrigation equipment supplier, and also you've made many farmers be able to access. And on top of that, for the bank, to de-risk the bank also, that's where the development partners come in to give, just like our development partner just mentioned here, the bank comes in to give a credit guarantee. So that now again, when the bank gives a loan of 40%, there is a guarantee. So again, there is where you come with that mechanism of asset finance. That way, you will be able to increase the penetration of irrigation. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Deval, as an economist, when we talk about development partners and investment in the water sector, then we should be talking about public-private partnerships, or PPPs. Now, if you've been watching the news, PPPs really haven't been getting the best rap. There's been a lot of myths surrounding PPPs, maybe endless paperwork, dozens of consultants, years before work actually begins on the ground. What is the biggest myth about PPPs in this water sector that you would debunk as an economist?
So the biggest myth is that somehow it's easy. And PPPs, basically, it's somewhere in the system, somebody is borrowing some money, and it's somewhere in the system that money has to be paid back. It comes down to something incredibly simple. Now, the issue with setting up PPPs well is that you really need to study them and find a future revenue stream which can repay the investment. Now, that revenue stream can come from different places. It can come from farmers, it can come from water users, it can even come from government itself. But you need to structure these PPPs very carefully. And I think the big shift that we need to make in Kenya is to move from privately initiated proposals to publicly tendered proposals. And to do that, we need to build capacity to actually structure these in-house, in the Ministry of Water, so that we can put out credible PPPs to the market. And we don't have to look far to learn where to do this and how to do this. We only have to look at the energy sector, electricity specifically. And we can learn an enormous amount from the electricity sector, which was running lots of high-speed diesel in the past, to now being an extremely green sector. And they've basically done that through PPPs. And I believe we can do the same in the water sector by designing them in-house and carefully putting them to tender and making them extremely competitive.
All right. Now, I'd like to come to you, Eric, but in just a moment. Let's have a quick fire moment for the PSs on the crowd, because we're talking about a lot of investment priorities and not enough funding. So, Mr. PS Korir, here's a scenario. If a donor walks right in now with a blank check, perhaps even sitting on the crowd, and says, I'm ready to invest, but you all must agree on one priority. What would that be for you, PS Korir?
Thank you. I think that is a very, very important question, because, as you say, money is scarce, and that has made us to be very deliberate in the way we prepare. We have, through our engineers in the ministry, prepared projects that is done feasibility studies, done designs, and costed, and even including the BQs, so that if somebody walked in now, we'll just ask what are your priorities. Actually, we turn it the other way. How is this project meeting your objectives? So we have several projects that are ready for investments. We've costed, we've designed, and I'll just name but a few. We have like Maragua 4, which is to build water storage and bring water to Nairobi. We have another one called Dambana. We have another one called Keben. We have Bute. We have Isiolo dams. We have Abadea complex, and so many others. In addition to these major storage structures, because that is where we have a major challenge, we have also designed water distribution systems to urban centers. So that if I want something for a town like now, we've just finished a pre-appraisal with Africa Development Bank for what we are calling national urban projects, where we are funding 22 projects for small towns in the country. So projects to put money will not be a problem. I think I just want to say something that the gentleman from World Bank mentioned, which I wanted to also reiterate, is that yes, PPP appears small and very attractive, but the work that goes into it until you satisfy the investor that he is guaranteed to get his revenue stream is very hard. At the moment, we have about 4 that are at the financial close. We have Sabaki Bulk, which is in Kilifi. We have Lamu Desalination Plant, which we are now in the negotiation and implementation of proof of concept. We have Mzima 2, which is in the project design, and Naivasha SEZ to supply. So, and from the lessons of driving this, it has shown us that we need to be ready, and I think now we are building the capacity of our staff so that instead of having the PIP, which is a privately initiated, we could have the project designed, then we advertise for the best to apply. Thank you.
All right, now PS Korir has almost 4 projects, really. If that donor works with the blank check. PS Kimodo, remember, you all must agree on one project. What is that one project for you?
Fine. As just as PS has mentioned, I would also have like 12 projects, but I'll just mention one. If I walked in today here, I'll tell him we need to finance a dam, and this dam would be Galana Dam. Galana Dam would need, in terms of USD, will need 250 million USD. But just to demonstrate how PPP and the development partner work, I will not tell the donor to finance 250 million USD. I'll ask the donor to finance 100 million USD. Because after financing 100 million USD, the balance of 150 will quickly be able to get a PPP partner. And if he had 250, I'll be able to put the other 150 to other projects. And that's how the blended finance work. Whereby he puts 100 them, he de-risks the project, the other 150, I get a PPP partner who will be able to finance using private money and pay himself using the irrigation tariff. And that the story will not end there. Because after financing the Galana Dam, that will also help attract another investor who will come. Galana has a potential of doing 200,000 acres. So we'll get another potential investor who will come and finance the 200,000 acres and probably put another $1 billion, which will also help the country, also in stabilizing the foreign exchange. But more important, it will be able to help us be able to put at least 1 acre in Galana gives you $70 per year. So by so doing, that means we'll be able to get almost 14 million bags of maize, bringing the issue of food imports of maize to 0. So that would be my first priority. Thank you.
Okay. Deval, PS Kibota talks about blended finance. We also have green bonds. We have result-based models. From an economist perspective, what do you see as the most practical path forward for this sector in terms of development partners?
So it goes back to this idea I explained earlier, which is that we need to have a very sophisticated way to match the types of finance. Because as you say, a green bond would be very different to another development partner's offer. Every blank check, as you call it, comes with a term sheet, if you like. So we need to get very, very skilled at matching those term sheets, those blank checks with the conditions that come along with them, because naturally there are some forms of the focus, if you like, that they come with what's needed. And that ability of the ministry to do that is something that really is absolutely critical, because Murang'a 4 is clearly the most important thing for Nairobi, right? But for Samburu, it might be in Wamba. It might be a small system in Wamba to augment that. So the returns have to be matched to the terms of each of these blank checks.
Right. Eric, transparency and accountability matter in donor relations. How do these determine future commitments from partners, even like Denmark?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting and tough question at the same time. I think what we need to know is that Kenya is now a middle-income country. So we are going to talk less of grant aid-based financing and more of PPPs and innovating financing. The interesting bit is that when this discussion changes from donor financing to PPPs or innovative financing, then this question of accountability pops in and is normally clearly defined. And it has to come with, if it is a private engagement, what is the return of investment and all that. But if you are to go back in the aspect of donor financing, this means that you get an aid and a grant and you have to account for it. Then that really matters, because I think many donors will not always shout out and say that we are not going to support ministry because this and this is happening, but they walk out silently and they say that we will have to consider if you are going to engage this ministry. For us, it has never happened with the Ministry of Water, because so far since 2024, we have investment over 7 billion shillings in this sector. And the fact that we are still in this sector, it means that so far the journey has been good. But I would say that if we go into innovative financing and PPPs and blended financing, it is normally clearly discussed, and the issue of transparency, for some reason, is sorted out. Yeah.
All right. PS Korir, let's talk about the same thing. Transparency and accountability. And you would bear me witness that this perhaps has, the lack of transparency and accountability in general governance has fueled the myth and perceptions towards private partnerships, towards donor funding. What is the state of transparency and accountability in investments in the water sector itself?
Thank you. It's more of a trick question, but I just want to say that adherence to governance and integrity statutes is what we dwell in and what we live by. And that's why I think, as one of the development partners has said, is that that's why they're still in the water sector. We embrace very transparent mechanism, and we put systems that are multi-layered, so that if something slips through in the first layer, the second layer it won't go through. And by the time you reach the third layer, all the possible loopholes will have been identified, and we do proper procurement, because that is where normally the problem comes in. In the area of PPP, and I believe PPP, especially the PIPs, have had very bad reputation in the country. In anticipation of the same, what we did for the 4 projects that I've mentioned to you is that we have we've embraced what we call public participation, so that, like the Sabaki water system, we've had meetings with the county governments of Mombasa, Kilifi, and Kwale. We have had meetings with the community where the water is coming from, and to the consumers who will be receiving, the people who may be affected by the project, especially where the water transmission will be passing through. We've had engagements so that we carry everyone behind. We've even had online advertisements, media advertisements, because we don't want a situation whereby somebody will come and say, I was not consulted, or misinformation is given, and they end up spreading the wrong rumor, or the wrong information. So what we've done is that we are embracing the highest standards of transparency and accountability.
Right. And as you speak, tariff reforms and cost recovery remain a major debate especially in the urban-rural access disparities, a lot of access issues. What is being done to change this, make it more accessible?
I think, as I mentioned earlier, we have an agency mandated by law to set standards in the service provision. And that means they set the standard of service provision, that is the water sector, WASREP, Water Sector Regulatory Board. Their mandate is, one, to ensure that consumers of water are served in the best, with the best standards. That is regularity of supply, the price that goes with it, the quality of water, and in coming up with the prices, it is not a decision of the WASREP. It starts, first of all, by the water service provision proposing to the agency. Then we evaluate, and when we realize their proposal is not right, we now give suggestions and go back to the community where the water will be served and say, okay, these are the tariffs that are being proposed for serving you. Do you agree with them? And if there is a case where the community does not agree with, we will agree together and have parameters that will be satisfactory to all parties. So it is not an imposition of tariffs. It is a participatory process of setting tariffs for the citizens. Then on the same also, we empower through education that the citizens can also demand quality service from the water service providers, so that if they feel a water service provider is not serving them, maybe there are more outages, the water is not clean, they should be able to raise that complaint to our WASREP or even take other judicial processes to demand for better services.
Right. PS Kimodo, rainfall remains the default irrigation strategy, especially in most rural areas. What is being done to change the shift, to have a mind shift in these areas? And is it an issue of mind shift or a lack of information and access to technology?
Yeah, it's true. Currently, most of agriculture is of our food production is based on rainfall, just to rightly say it. So by 5% is irrigation. And because of the effect of climate change, irrigation becomes the way to go. I think the issue here is not even so much of an issue of mindset. It's actually the issue of resources. Because like the current area under irrigation, all of it is based on surface water flow. So for us to increase that area under irrigation, we require more investments. So we're talking about building of dams. We are talking about, if it's in the ASALs, we're talking about building of check dams, and all that require investment. So it's more of an issue of investments, and that's why you said that's why we said we have now that strategy. But also there is a small element of mindset. Now that comes when it comes to maximum production, whereby people before have looked at the irrigation as a social good. Now we want to change it so that people can look at it as an economic good, and that's why one of the key things that we're also doing is also to do a lot of capacity building to the farmers, and also work together with the counties to ensure that we create market linkages. Because when you create market linkages, what you do, you also enable the farmer to have ability to pay. So once the farmer has the ability to pay, then that means we can also be able to attract more money, especially the private sector, towards such investments. You can be able to create revenue flows, which will lead to increase in the area under irrigation. Thank you.
All right. Let's begin winding up this conversation. So, Mr. Deval, from this conversation, here from the Ministry of Water, Sanitation and Irrigation, what would you say are the key takeaways that both the Ministry of Water and private partners need to address the most urgent emerging issues?
So I think the most urgent emerging issue is this idea of setting up a pipeline of projects so that we know that and a lot of this has been done already through NAWASIP and NISIP. These are the two programs But additional detail now needs to be gone into. P.S. Correa said that there are already BOQs for specific projects, but we need to extend that pipeline of projects. We need really to go into detail and then get people around this pipeline of projects to understand what's involved. Some will be viable commercially. So then we should get the commercial banks around, get private partners around, and they might be private partners who are involved in bringing efficiency to the sector. They might be private partners who are able to reduce non-revenue water or increase energy efficiency or increase operational efficiency by installing billing systems or things like that. So I think that pipeline is key, but the transparency is also very, very important. And WASREB are doing an excellent job in explaining where we are. Transparency helps us understand where we are. And we know right now we are at a position where we're basically selling water for less than it costs to produce. So we've got to make the whole system more efficient. And that's really where these project designs are. So they're not all big projects. Some of them are quite small projects and might be about getting a particular part of Nairobi to be more efficient in its delivery. Right? So it's not just the big projects we need to sort out, it's also the smaller ones.
All right. Eric, from the perspective of a development partner, an existing development partner, what can the Kenyan government, the Ministry of Water, do better in terms of proposals, in terms of presenting the proposals to attract more investors?
Yeah, I think, of course, there's always room for improvement. We can't say that they have done their best, but I think they have presented what the development partners can work with. And from the development partners side, we need to talk to each other. And Denmark has currently taken the chairmanship of the Water Sanitation Development Partners Group. And here we are saying, look, this is what the government is presenting. How can we synergize and pinpoint straightly how do we feed into this? And the CS gave a very clear request when we met the other day at the embassy. Please also tell us as donors, what do you want to do in the next 3 years? So the ministry has communicated, this is the frame, fall somewhere in the frame and deliver. So I feel like when we start going to that frame and seeing what we can do to achieve some of these great projects, then while there, we are able to see what is missing. And maybe what is missing might be we are really focusing too much on delivering the water and forgetting where the water is coming from. Or maybe we are really focusing too much on where the water is coming from and where the water is going and focusing on the people who are receiving the water. So for now, I can't say that I see anything that they could do much better, but there's room for improvement. But I will call for the development partners to try to align to this vision so that when we have a stake talking for maybe after 3 years, we're able to say that we went in and we worked with these amazing documents and investment plans, but together we feel that this is what we need to improve on, because that is the spirit of equal partnerships.
All right, P.S. Correa, do you agree? And in closing, what would you want development partners, potential donors, private sector to take away from this conversation?
Thank you so much. I think I agree with what Eric and also what Devalda said, that one, we should have more projects ready in the pipeline, but we should go further to ensure now to see which revenue stream that they are eligible for. The other thing also is the support, especially in the project preparation, in the area of viability assessment. I think that is an area that we are not able to do sufficiently, especially when it comes to bridging and making the projects viable for the PPP. Most of some of the projects that we had started on the PPP fell by the wayside on the basis of finding the water becoming more expensive than what the customers were willing. And so if such a situation comes up, how do we bridge the gap? I think that is an area that we are asking support in. Then in making also the water supply cheap, this is an area that we want a lot of support, especially in the technology area. Solarization wind power, as well as also exploring gravity systems that will help in reducing the cost of transmission. Because when you look at servicing water supply area, the most expensive part is on the energy. For instance, if you look at the cost where we are actually the bulk water supplier, we get revenue of 90 million and we pay 85 for energy. So you can see you're only left with 5 million to pay staff, which if it were not for the national government to supplement, we are not able to even treat the water. So you find those are the areas that we need a lot of support in. Thank you.
Okay, that's a good point to close. P.S. Kimotho, your takeaway from this as you close.
Yeah, I think also the takeaway, especially from the development partner, is to continue with our enhanced collaboration. And just as I said in my opening remarks, agriculture contributes 21% of the GDP. And but if you look at the banking sector, agriculture only in the loan sector, debt sector, you find agriculture is only 3%, meaning banks have always considered agriculture as a risk. So to de-risk that, we call upon development partners to partner with us by creating the credit guarantee mechanisms so that you can be able to catalyze more private sector investments through such that we can see a situation whereby at least the 3% goes up a little bit so that we can continue supporting our farmers and ensure we have food security. Thank you.
All right, so that is a good close to this conversation and a great panel as we discuss priority areas of investment in Kenya's water, sanitation, irrigation and sanitation sector. In the panel this morning is Mr. Julius Koriri, is the Principal Secretary, State Department for Water and Sanitation, a man who is on the front line and leading the push to expand water, clean water and infrastructure across the country. Next to him is P.S. Ephantus Kimotho, Principal Secretary, State Department for Irrigation, tasked with ensuring that every drop of water in the country contributes to Kenya's food security goals. We also have Mr. Dominic Deval, representing the World Bank, a global voice in water financing, as well as long-term infrastructure solutions. And last but not least, Mr. Eric Ogallo, representing the Royal Danish Embassy, a strategic partner investing heavily in sustainable water solutions in Kenya. Gentlemen, many, many thanks for sharing your time and expertise with us. Now, as we do, please let's give them a round of applause. I'm sure we've all learned a thing or two. We'd also like to invite our panelists to give us a keepsake picture as we did the first panel. So please, if we can have a photographer. We're noting a serious disparity in terms of the 2/3 gender rule in our panels. And I don't know if this is something the sector needs to address, but it would be nice to see more women on these panels. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. We'd like to carry on with the rest of the program. We have 2 more panels coming up before we take a break. Let me hand it over back to Nina Sheban.